first thing the Turian patrol on the Presidium's upper walkways registered was a sound like reality itself tearing in half, a thunderclap that had no business existing in the carefully controlled atmosphere of the Citadel. The second thing was the fireball, a screaming comet of white-hot promethium and shattered metal that punched through the distant glittering spires of the Zakera ward and hurtled, utterly unstoppable, towards the heart of the station. It wasn't a crash, it was an impact, a deliberate, violent insertion. The ground shook, the air shimmered with displaced energy, and from the newly formed crater of molten deck plating and shattered marble, 7 giants emerged. They were clad in ceramite the colour of dried blood, their armour scarred and pitted even from their unorthodox arrival. They stood a head taller than any Krogan, broader than an Elcor, and the air around them grew cold with a palpable aura of absolute, unyielding purpose. The lead giant, his helmet crested with a skull, swept his gaze across the panicking crowd of Asari diplomats, Solarian merchants, and Turian guards. His voice, amplified by his helmet's vox grill, was not a shout. It was a decree, a verdict spoken with the force of a galactic law. Xenos filth, abominable intelligence, by the grace of the God Emperor we bring purification. Bolters roared, the explosive shells tearing through Turian carapace and Asari flesh, with equal, indiscriminate fury. The age of the Imperium had come to the Citadel, and it began not with a hello, but with a declaration of total war. Chaos erupted. The serene, curated peace of the Presidium was shattered by the staccato thunder of mass accelerators and the deeper, more visceral crump of bolt rounds detonating. The Space Marines, the Crimson Templars, moved with a synchronicity that was terrifying to behold. They were not 7 individuals. They were a single, multi-limbed engine of death. A Turian guard took cover behind a reinforced kiosk, only for the entire structure to be vaporized by a melter-gun blast from the squad's heavy weapons specialist. An Asari huntress, her biotics flaring blue, managed to throw a warp at one of the giants, but the Marine simply shrugged off the matter-disrupting energy, his armour smoking but his stride unbroken. He closed the distance in 2 strides and backhanded her with his powered gauntlet, the blow snapping her neck like a twig. This was not a battle, it was a culling. The Citadel security, trained for riots and criminal scum, were utterly outmatched. Their rounds sparked harmlessly off the thick ceramite plate, and their tactics were primitive, almost childish to the post-human warriors who had waged war across 1,000,000 worlds for 10,000 years. The Crimson Templars saw not a diverse community of sentient beings, but a menagerie of heresies. The Turians were militant Xenos, the Asari psychic witches, the Solarians. Well, they were just targets. The silence of the void, they knew, was the only acceptable state for the galaxy. Anything else was noise, and noise was to be silenced. It was into this maelstrom that Commander Shepard arrived, flanked by Garrus and Liara. The scene was a slaughterhouse. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, blood, and something else, something acrid and chemical. Promethium. "By the goddess," Liara whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Garrus didn't speak, his mandibles tight against his face as he took in the carnage, his own rifle feeling suddenly inadequate. Shepard's voice cut through the din, amplified by his own armour. "Stand down! You're attacking Citadel space. Stand down now!" The lead Space Marine, the one with the skull crest, turned slowly. Shepard felt the weight of that gaze even through the helmet's lenses. It was like being sized up by a predator from a deadlier, darker epoch. The Marine gestured, and his brothers ceased fire, forming a defensive perimeter with their bodies, their weapons still trained on the surrounding C-sec positions. The sudden quiet was deafening, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of fires. "I am Chaplain Valerius of the Crimson Templars," the giant's voice boomed. "You, human, bear the taint of the alien. You consort with these things. You are compromised. Step aside. The work of purification is not yet complete." "This is madness," Shepard shot back, stepping forward, his own will a match for the chaplain's imposing presence. "We're in the middle of a war for the survival of every organic life form in the galaxy. The Reapers are here. They're wiping out entire worlds. We need every ally we can get." "Ally?" Valerius spat the word like a curse. "There is no alliance with the mutant, the witch, the Xenos. There is only the purity of mankind, safeguarded by the God Emperor and his Astartes. You speak of a threat? These Reapers? They are but another form of corruption to be scoured from the stars. Your path of compromise and cowardice is what allows such filth to fester." Garrus's subvocals rumbled with a low growl. "Shepard, this guy's a fanatic, he's not listening." Liara tried a different tack, her voice calm, diplomatic. "Chaplain, please. We have shared knowledge, technology. We can show you the threat. The Reapers are an existential danger. They cannot be fought with prejudice alone. They require unity." "Unity is a lie told by the weak to excuse their own inadequacy," Valerius declared, his hand resting on the hilt of his massive chainsword. "Your unity has led you to this, a den of Xenos and their human collaborators, blind to the true enemy, the enemy within, the enemy without. The only unity that matters is the unity of faith in the Emperor. The only strategy is total, absolute annihilation of the other. You would have us stand shoulder to shoulder with abominations. I would rather see this entire station burn in holy fire." Shepard stood his ground, the ideological chasm between them as vast and cold as the space between galaxies. He saw soldiers, necessary and powerful, but blinded by a dogma that would get them all killed. Valerius saw a heretic, a lost soul so corrupted by Xenos influence that he could no longer see the simple, brutal truth of the universe. It was an argument that could not be won with words, only with force. And before either could make that final, fateful move, the station shook again. But this tremor was different. It wasn't a localized impact. It was a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to come from the very superstructure of the Citadel itself. The lights flickered, and a new monstrous shape descended through the open space of the Presidium. A harvest ship, a Reaper destroyer, its form a blasphemy against physics and biology. The real war had just found them. Chaplain Valerius looked up at the descending horror, a machine the size of a skyscraper, and for the first time his absolute certainty seemed to flicker. But it was not with fear, it was with a kind of grim, terrifying recognition. A machine of the Dark Age, he voxed to his brothers, a construct of the soulless. It bears the mark of the Necrontyr, or perhaps a greater demon of the machine god's foes. See how it defies the natural order, see its blasphemous form. The Emperor provides us with a worthy foe. In his name, purge it. The Crimson Templars did not hesitate. They did not seek cover. They did not coordinate with the scattering CSEC forces. They saw a target, a manifestation of everything they had been created to destroy. They opened fire as one. Bolter shells streaked upwards, pounding against the Reaper's kinetic barriers. The Marine with the multi-melter fired a searing lance of energy that actually scorched the Reaper's outer hull, drawing a shriek of tortured metal. Their effectiveness was staggering. They fought with a total lack of self-preservation, advancing into the heart of the storm, their weapons firing with mechanical precision. A husk swarm descended upon them, and they met it with chainswords and fists, turning the cybernetic abominations into paste and shrapnel. They were a scalpel of pure, unadulterated violence, and for a moment they seemed to be turning the tide in their small corner of the apocalypse. But their strength was also their weakness. They were 7. The Reapers were legion. A blast from the destroyer's main weapon, a beam of concentrated energy that could level a city block slammed into their position. 2 of the Templars were caught in the edge of the blast. Their armour, capable of withstanding direct hits from tank shells, was vaporized. They died instantly without a sound, reduced to atoms. The remaining 5 didn't pause to mourn. They simply adjusted their firing vectors, their litanies of hate growing louder over the Vox. They saw the loss not as a tragedy, but as a martyrdom. Shepard, Garrus and Liara watched in a mixture of awe and horror. "They're effective," Garrus admitted, his sniper rifle picking off a husk that was flanking the Astartes. "But they're going to get themselves killed, and they don't care." "That's the problem," Shepard said, his Omnitool flaring as he hacked a nearby turret to target the husks. "They don't care about the bigger picture, they only care about the kill. They're a weapon with no off switch, aimed at everything." He saw Valerius bodily lift a cannibal and rip it in half with his bare hands, and he knew that this raw, primal power was too dangerous, too uncontrollable. It was a fire that would consume everything, friend and foe alike, until there was nothing left but ashes and the echoing silence of its own dogma. In the end, the Reaper destroyer was brought down by a combined salvo from the Normandy and the remaining Citadel defence fleet, a coordinated effort that the Crimson Templars had no part in. As the colossal machine crashed into the Presidium Lake, Sending a tidal wave of water across the embattled plaza, a tense quiet fell once more. The 5 remaining Space Marines stood amidst the carnage they had helped create, their armour scorched and dented, their weapons still hot. They had faced the Necron demon and survived. In their eyes, they had been victorious. Chaplain Valerius turned to Shepard, his helmet now removed. His face was a roadmap of scars. His eyes held the cold fire of a zealot who has just had his faith confirmed. You see, human, the Xenos technology fails before the righteous fury of the Adeptus Astartes. The path is clear. Join us. Help us cleanse this station. Purge the alien, the mutant, the heretic. It is the only way to salvation. Shepard looked at Valerius, then at the bodies of the C-Sec officers and civilians the Astartes had cut down in their initial rampage. He looked at Garrus and Liara, his friends, his allies. He saw the path the Crimson Templars offered, a galaxy scoured clean, silent and dead. A galaxy without the vibrant, messy, beautiful diversity that made it worth saving. No, Shepard said, his voice firm and final. Your salvation is extinction. Your purity is a cage. You're not the cure for this war. You're a symptom of the very mindless hatred the Reapers represent. He raised his hand, and from the shadows a full squad of Alliance Marines and Asari commandos emerged, their weapons trained on the Astartes. You are a threat to the only hope this galaxy has. You will stand down, and you will be detained. Valerius's face contorted into a mask of fury and betrayal. So you choose the alien over your own kind. You are lost. He raised his chainsword, its teeth screaming to life. Then die with your Xenos pets. But Shepard was ready. He had already given the order. A precisely aimed, high-yield disruptor torpedo, fired from a Normandy fighter wing, struck the ground between Shepard and the Astartes. It didn't explode with concussive force, but with a massive, localized electromagnetic pulse. The effect on the Astartes' power armor was instantaneous and catastrophic. Systems shorted out, servos locked, and the 5 giants staggered, their movements suddenly slow and laboured, their advanced targeting systems and comms rendered useless. They were still unbelievably strong, still deadly, but they were blind and deaf, trapped in tombs of their own ceramite. "Contain them," Shepard yelled. "Use the industrial mag clamps, get them into stasis fields." It was a brutal, undignified struggle. The Astartes fought like caged animals, but without their armor's systems, they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers and specialized equipment. They were dragged, bellowing curses and litanies of hate, towards waiting, heavily modified cargo transports, their cells lined with null-field generators and the strongest alloys the Citadel could produce. Later on the bridge of the Normandy, Shepard stared out at the scarred face of the Citadel. The damage was extensive. The Reaper attack had been repelled, but at a great cost, and the arrival of the Crimson Templars had added a new, chilling dimension to the conflict. "We've secured them in the deepest, most secure holding facility on the Citadel," Garrus reported, coming to stand beside him. "It won't hold them forever, Shepard. You know that, right? Those things, they'll break out eventually." "I know," Shepard said quietly, "but we can't release them, and we can't kill them in cold blood. They're victims of their own ideology as much as anyone." Liara joined them, her expression grim. "I have analysed their vessel's data core, what little survived the crash. Their universe, their Imperium, it is a place of unending, unimaginable horror. They are not evil, Shepard. They are a product of their environment, a necessary response to a galaxy infinitely more monstrous than our own. But that necessity makes them incompatible with our survival." Shepard nodded. He had seen it in Valerius's eyes, a faith so absolute it left no room for doubt, for mercy, for growth. It was a strength, but it was also the greatest weakness. In a war that required understanding, adaptation and unity, the Space Marines were a relic from a darker age, a perfect weapon that was utterly unsuited for the battle at hand. They were a storm that had blown in from a more brutal reality, and the only way to survive them was to let them pass, and hope you could rebuild in the aftermath. The Reapers were a threat to the body of the galaxy. The Crimson Templars, he realised with a cold dread, were a cancer on its very soul.